The sea was not still that night. It whispered, gurgled, and sang low songs beneath the stars, as if it knew a secret the world had yet to hear. Moonlight shimmered across its glassy surface, painting ripples of silver that danced from one shore to another. But on one peculiar little island no bigger than a sleepy village, there came a sound, not of waves, nor wind, nor gulls. It was the sound of roots stretching, earth groaning, and sand slipping away. High atop the island's only hill, a small lighthouse blinked once, then twice, as if startled. Around its base, the trees shivered, though no wind had touched them. The stones underfoot shifted slightly, like waking limbs after a long slumber. And at the edge of the quiet beach, a line of seashells trembled, then rolled away as the land beneath them began to move. Far below, deep in the roots of the island itself, something ancient stirred, something that had been waiting. With a low rumble, the island lifted, gently, like a boat pushing off from shore. It floated not on water, but above it, rising just a little, as if taking a breath. The people of the island, all fast asleep in their cottages of driftwood and thatch, did not notice at first. Not the baker with flour still on his nose. Not the fisherman who had fallen asleep counting stars. Not even little Isla, who always dreamed of flying. All slept, unaware, as their homes slowly drifted away from the coast, untethered, unchained, and quietly soaring just above the waves. And the sea, ever wise, did not shout, it only watched. By morning, the world had changed. A pale mist hugged the horizon where the sea met the sky, and the island was no longer where it had always been. Instead of the familiar mountains on the mainland or the seagulls that once circled the fishing boats, there was only ocean endless and blue, stretching in all directions. Little Isla was the first to wake. She rubbed her eyes and sat up in her bed, listening to the strange silence outside her window. There were no creaking docks, no clinking sails, no voices of early risers heading to the market. Only the steady hum of something different. She tiptoed to her window, pulled aside the woven curtain, and gasped. Where once there had been the bustling village square and the long, winding path that led down to the port, now there was only water and sky. The island was floating. At first, Isla thought it must be a dream. But dreams didn't make her heart race like this. Dreams didn't carry the scent of sea salt so clearly, or make the trees sway gently in a wind that came from nowhere. She raced down the ladder from her loft, bare feet padding across the floor, and out the door into the light of morning. Other villagers were gathering now, blinking in the strange brightness, pointing at the sky where it should have been land, and at the sea, which now surrounded them completely. They spoke in quiet murmurs, unsure what had happened. Old Mr. Corbin, the lighthouse keeper, squinted into the distance, muttering about magic he had once heard in bedtime tales. The baker clutched a tray of morning rolls, forgotten in his hands. And the fisherman, wide-eyed and barefoot, whispered that the sea was no longer beneath them, but below them. The island was not only adrift, it was flying. The children were the first to run with delight, laughing and leaping through the meadows, pretending they had wings. The grown-ups were more careful, more confused. They studied the sky, the sun, and the gentle tilt of their once still earth. Isla, standing near the cliff's edge, stared downward where the water shimmered, and far below, the shadow of their island danced atop the ocean's surface like a cloud. Her heart fluttered. Something magical was happening, something no one could explain. By midday, strange things began to appear. A cloud shaped like a giant fish swam past the hilltop. Trees tilted toward the sun, growing a little faster than they should. Birds that had never been seen before circled the island blue-feathered, long-tailed, and singing melodies that made the air hum with color. The island seemed alive. Not in the way all land is alive, with grass growing and trees blooming, but in a way that made Isla feel it was breathing, listening, even choosing. The ground was softer, the flowers brighter. Apples ripened in the blink of an eye. Bees buzzed with golden trails. Even the sea below, though distant now, looked calmer than ever before. But not all was peaceful. By evening, clouds gathered. Not the friendly, slow-moving kind, but clouds as dark as night, coiling and twisting in silence. Lightning blinked inside them, silent flashes that lit the world like a blinking eye. The floating island trembled. Not enough to shake the cottages, but just enough to feel noticed. And that night, the dreams came. Isla lay in bed, listening to the quiet, when a warmth spread through her room, like sunlight without the light. In her dream, she stood in a forest of glowing trees, their leaves whispering secrets. A voice, not loud but deep and kind, spoke to her not with words, but with feelings. "The island is old," the feeling said, "older than you know. It was made to drift long ago, but it was anchored for many lifetimes, waiting for a heart open enough to feel it again." Isla didn't understand, but she felt a pull deep in her chest, like when she heard music or saw a bird take flight. The voice or the island was showing her something. It showed her children playing on shores that were no longer there, and roots that reached deeper than soil. It showed her stars dancing above a sky that turned and turned as if time was a wheel. And then it showed her something cold and gray, something reaching from the sea below with hands not made of flesh but fog. She awoke with tears in her eyes and her hand clutching her chest. By morning, others had strange dreams too. Mr. Corbin dreamed of the sea turning to glass. The baker dreamed of a voice calling for help. The fisherman dreamed of the island sinking, swallowed by shadows. And yet, the day dawned golden and soft, as if the island had chosen to smile again. Isla felt it first, a tug not from the ground, but from the sky, as if the island was being pulled somewhere, guided. She followed the feeling, climbing up the path to the lighthouse, where the view stretched far beyond what anyone had ever seen. Out there, in the distance, floated another island. Not just a speck, not a ship, but a full island, just like theirs, green and round and slowly spinning. Others soon saw it too. One by one, the villagers climbed the path, mouths agape. The sky was not empty. It was full of floating islands, drifting like seeds in the wind. Some were close, others far away, but they were moving, gathering, it seemed. And then, the storm returned. This time it was louder. The clouds rumbled, wind howled, and the sea below turned dark and churning. The air grew heavy, and birds flew in tight circles, anxious. The children stopped playing. The trees bent low. The island shuddered again, not gently now, but with warning. From the clouds, a shape emerged. Long and jagged, with tendrils of mist and shadow, it slithered between the sky and sea. Like smoke turned to monster. The villagers gasped. Some backed away. Mr. Corbin dropped his lantern. Ela stared, her knees shaking, yet her heart holding firm. The shape did not land. It circled. It searched. The island, once so still and cheerful, began to dim. Colors faded. Flowers drooped. Even the birds went silent. The magic was hiding. But Isla knew, deep in her bones, that the island was afraid. And just like that, she understood. The island wasn't only alive, it was in danger. She turned to the crowd, to the adults now hushed and trembling. Though no one spoke aloud, they all knew something had to be done. But what could they do? They were just people, bakers, gardeners, fishermen, children. Isla stepped forward. The island had called to her. It had shown her something, chosen her, maybe. She didn't know what to say. She only knew she had to listen. So she closed her eyes and placed her palm on the earth. The ground was cold, but deep down, it pulsed. A heart, beating slow and steady. She whispered inside herself, not with words, but with kindness. She told the island not to be afraid. She told it she would help, that all of them would. And slowly, the ground warmed beneath her hand. Behind her, others knelt. They didn't know what Isla had seen, but they felt it too. The island was not just land. It was part of them, and they would not let it fall. Above them, the shadow twisted once more. It would return. But so would the light. The storm grew teeth. Clouds snapped like jaws across the sky. Thunder bursting so close it shook the trees. The dark shape circled lower now, long and smoky, made of cloud and chill. It didn't have a face, not in the way people do, but its shape carried hunger, the kind that could swallow light. It reached with long curling arms toward the floating island, and the air around it turned sharp and cold. The villagers gathered in the meadow near the lighthouse, their faces pale, eyes wide with fear. The children clung to their parents, and the wind whipped through the grass, bending it flat against the earth. Mr. Corbin stood tall, his weathered hands gripping the old lighthouse railing. The fisherman shielded his eyes, trying to see where the storm would strike next. The baker held a child in each arm, their small hands tangled in his apron. But Isla didn't flinch. She stood at the front of the crowd, where the wind hit hardest, where the sky was darkest. Her hair tangled behind her like a flag, and her heart beat faster than ever before. The island's pulse, deep beneath the ground, was stronger now. Not afraid, awake. The dark creature let out a sound then, not a roar, but something worse. A silence that pressed on ears and chests, that filled the space between thoughts with dread. Trees bent backward, and birds scattered into the clouds. The island began to sink. Not fast, but steadily. The sea below loomed closer. The sky above seemed heavier, pressing the island down. The roots groaned, stones cracked. A flower petal lifted from its stem and floated away. The people looked to one another. What could they do? They had no swords, no spells, no shields. Just homes and hands and hearts. Isla dropped to her knees and pressed both palms to the ground. She didn't know what to say. She only knew how she felt. She remembered the dream, the glowing trees, the voice without words, the memories that didn't belong to her but to the island itself. She saw it all again, in a blink. The first time the island had floated, long ago, before people lived on it, when it drifted in peace, a gift of magic and sky, when it was taken by the sea once before, and buried deep in silence. It had risen again, because someone had believed in wonder. Now it needed someone brave enough to protect it. She closed her eyes and reached deep, past the stone and soil, into the beating heart of the island. The cold of the storm bit at her skin, but she ignored it. The creature above shrieked silently, but she didn't move. The wind tore at her clothes, but her hands stayed firm on the ground. The island responded. A low hum, deep and warm, vibrated through the grass. It spread through the roots, the trees, the cottages. Lights flickered in every window. A breeze, gentle and gold, swept outward from the center of the island. The villagers felt it too. One by one, they dropped to their knees and pressed their hands into the earth. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Every heart carried the same message. You are not alone. And the island heard them. The floating land, once drooping toward the sea, began to lift. Slowly at first, then faster. The stones stopped cracking. The roots stopped groaning. The flowers brightened, and the birds returned, circling overhead with songs like bells. The shadow shrieked again, louder now, and dove toward the island. But something stopped it. A barrier, soft as light but strong as stone, shimmered around the edges of the floating land. The shadow struck it and recoiled. It tried again, whipping its long limbs forward, but the light held firm. It could not pass. The storm creature howled, a hollow, curling sound that faded into 1,000 whispers. The clouds around it began to peel away, one by one, like torn pieces of a curtain. Its shape grew smaller, weaker, thinned by the warmth it could not enter. And then Isla stood. Her voice rose, not loud, but steady. Inside her chest, the island's magic stirred. Not like a fire, but like a song, one of peace, one of promise. She lifted her hand toward the storm, and the light followed her gesture, flowing upward like golden wind. The dark shape tried once more to strike, but the island rose higher. The air brightened, the clouds parted, and the sea below turned from steel to sapphire. The shadow twisted, thinned, and with one last desperate shriek, it scattered into the wind like ash caught in a sunrise. The sky cleared. The silence broke. And the island, bright and strong, soared free once more. The villagers stood slowly, staring around at their home. Everything was the same, and yet nothing was. The colors were brighter, the trees taller, the wind was warmer, the sky wider. The children cheered first, laughing and dancing through the grass. Parents smiled, eyes wet with quiet joy. The baker handed out rolls, warm and soft. Mr. Corbin lit the lighthouse lamp, though the day was clear. The fisherman lifted a shell from the ground and held it to his ear. It sang, and Isla, standing at the edge of the meadow, looked up. Other floating islands had gathered nearby, some smaller, some larger, all drifting like stars in a blue sky. One, shaped like a bird, flew past with wings of clouds. Another, covered in ice and flowers, hovered gently in place. The floating world had opened, and the island had chosen to join it again. Isla felt something then, a quiet voice, not in her ears, but in her heart. It was the same feeling as the dream. The island thanked her. But she shook her head softly and placed her hand once more on the earth. "No," she whispered back inside herself. "Thank you for trusting us." The days that followed were like waking in a dream that never faded. The sky remained open and endless, filled with drifting shapes of other islands, gliding like lanterns through the clouds. The storm had passed, the shadow was gone, and the floating island that had once known stillness now knew freedom. But with freedom came change. The villagers, once simple folk who baked bread, mended nets, and fished the tides, now tended floating gardens and studied the patterns of the air currents. The fisherman no longer looked to the sea for his catch. Instead, he followed birds that dove between islands, and sometimes he returned with skyfish silver creatures that shimmered in sunlight and vanished when frightened. The baker discovered how to use starfruit that grew from the upper branches of sky trees, and his rolls now sparkled faintly when warm. Children built kites that never came down, and tossed sky stones that floated for hours before drifting gently to rest. They played with breeze beetles, tiny creatures with wings so light they could hover in place, riding the smallest gust. Even Mr. Corbin, who had once only watched ships, began charting new constellations, for the stars seemed closer now, and some of them moved. Yet the biggest change of all was in Isla. She still wore her old boots and climbed the same trees, but people now looked at her with quiet awe. They remembered how she had stood alone before the shadow, how she had knelt when no one else had, how she had spoken with no words and still been heard. Children followed her, mimicking her steps, and grown-ups asked her how she had known what to do. But Isla didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a part of something vast and alive, something she hadn't made but had answered. One morning, as mist curled gently across the meadow and sunlight trickled like honey through the trees, Isla wandered to the edge of the cliff. From there, she could see other islands close now, like neighbors floating quietly. Some were forests, some were waterfalls, some were so covered in feathers or moss that they looked like sleeping beasts. One had lights that blinked in patterns, like music only the stars could hear. A breeze wrapped around her, soft and kind. Isla closed her eyes and listened. Beneath her feet, the island's heartbeat was slow and steady, like the rhythm of breathing in sleep. It was content. Behind her, footsteps approached. Mr. Corbin joined her at the edge, holding a rolled-up map with bright ink dots. He pointed at one, then at another, murmuring about drifting paths and invisible winds. He smiled and said they were learning to read the sky, and soon they might be able to guide the island gently, respectfully, never forcing it, just suggesting where to go next. Isla nodded. That felt right. The floating island was not something to control. It was something to understand, like a friend or a story. Later that week, a council was held near the lighthouse. Not a formal one, but a circle of villagers sitting on woven mats and driftwood benches, sipping tea made from cloud leaves. They talked about the future, about building bridges to nearby islands, learning their ways, maybe even inviting visitors, but only if they were kind. Isla sat quietly at the edge of the circle, listening. When asked what she thought, she said only that the island had awakened because someone needed to remember it could. That maybe there were other forgotten islands out there, waiting for someone to believe in them. The villagers agreed. They would float gently, watch carefully, help where they could. And so, the floating island became not just a home, but a guidepost, a beacon of light for other drifting lands. Sometimes, a small island would appear nearby, lost and gray. The villagers would send lanterns floating on air currents, and soft songs would drift across the sky. If the island stirred, they'd share seeds and stories. And always, Isla would greet it first, with her hand on the ground, listening. Not every island answered. Some stayed quiet, drifting alone. But the villagers never gave up. They had learned that kindness was never wasted, even when unseen. As seasons passed, the island bloomed in new ways. Sky roses opened only at night, glowing pale blue. Streams of clear water ran uphill, flowing through song-carved stones. Trees grew taller and learned to bend in greeting when people walked by. The island itself grew slightly just enough to welcome more friends, more laughter, more dreams. One night, when the stars were especially bright, Isla stood again at the edge of the island, watching a small, glowing island approach from afar. A hush fell over the village. The island was unlike any they had seen. Its surface was smooth and crystalline, with light dancing beneath it like a sleeping memory. As it drifted closer, the floating island beneath Isla tilted slightly, just enough to meet the visitor halfway. The two touched edges gently. A low hum echoed through the air, soft and sweet, like two old friends recognizing each other after a long time apart. Isla smiled, placing her hand once more on the ground. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The island spoke for her now, in warmth and welcome. And so, the story of the floating island grew not just a tale of escape, or danger, or wonder, but of connection. A reminder that even lost places can be found again, that sometimes homes have wings, that hearts, when brave and open, can lift the very ground beneath them. The island that floated away had not left the world behind. It had shown the world how to rise.